favourite Uncle Frog here again. Now, normally when I do these videos, I'm talking about things that most reenactors or people who play in the SCA already know about. And there are experts out there who are far better than me and do far better videos on techniques and etc. And so I just do funny videos. I think they're funny, a little bit frivolous and telling you about all the mistakes that I made. However, for this one, making an authentic tent, well, there's not so much available on the internet, and people have asked me to be a little bit more serious on this one and go into a little bit more detail on some of the techniques that are used. So I will do my best. I'm not particularly good at being very serious, but yeah, I will try, just for you.
Hello, you lucky ducks. Yes, you get two of me this week. That me and this me. But why? Well, because the cock-up fairy came to visit. Originally, I'd intended to do a sort of video diary of me slowly putting this tent together and, working things out as I went. However, I needed to get this done for an event, and it all got rather stressful, rather intense, pun intended, of course. And so that didn't really happen. Also, the cock-up fairy obviously came to visit not just once, but multiple times. And so some of the things that me is saying they're not actually correct. And so this me is going to interrupt sometimes and correct it. Also, I decided to split this into two videos. So this video is going to be about the, all the bits and pieces that you need in order to build one of these tents, and some of the basic planning or advanced planning you need to do before you actually build it. The next video will be in about 2 weeks' time. And that one will be looking more at the techniques of various things like splicing ropes and what kind of stitching you need to do, all that sort of thing. So I think at this point it's back to that me who will carry on talking about things, and of course occasionally this me will interrupt to explain why I'm getting things wrong. So I'm going to be making an Anglo-Saxon tent, which, if I'm thinking with my English head on, it would be a geteld tent. If I'm thinking with my German head on, it would be a geteld tent. And with my Franconian head, where T's and D's are both pronounced the same, it would be a geteld. Yeah. So Anglo-Saxon tent, the classic one, and I'll put some pictures up now. So, hello, me again. I think it's worth mentioning at this point that the evidence we have for these Anglo-Saxon tents comes purely from manuscripts. We don't have any bits of wood surviving or any bits of material surviving that we know come from tents. They might do, but a stick's a stick, and a piece of material without any stitching on it is a piece of material without any stitching. It's also not quite right to say that we have Viking tents and we have Anglo-Saxon tents. What we have is a shipboard tent, which we found in the context of Viking burials, and we have a tent that is obviously put on land. The Anglo-Saxon tent, the geteld tent, that tent obviously has pegs that hold it up, and if you hammer pegs into a ship, things tend to get quite wet. Okay, back to that me.
You can see what they look like. Now, most reenactors and people in the SCA, they buy cotton canvas tents. But of course, cotton canvas for Anglo-Saxon period is not correct. And so you have two options instead of the cotton canvas. You can have wool or you can have linen. And they have certain advantages and disadvantages. Now, I've seen a linen tent that somebody in my old reenactment group produced, and more recently a really nice guy from the SCA, he's made himself a woolen tent. And looking at that and looking at it in detail, I thought, yeah, because I've always wanted to make one, I thought, yes, I can do that. And so I've gone for the woolen tent. But what's the difference? Well, the linen is probably a little bit lighter than the wool. I don't want to say it's stronger, but it probably keeps its shape better than the wool. However, there's two disadvantages to it. One of them is that it doesn't really protect you from the environment that much. If it's cold outside, it's cold in the tent. If it's hot outside, it's even hotter in the tent. And you've still got that. If you've got a light on inside, the light source in the tent, you're still doing that kind of shadow play thing. But the biggest problem is that if you want to authentically waterproof this, then you're going to need quite a lot of beeswax, and then you've got quite a large fire hazard at this point. The old joke, you're going to be warm once. So I went down the other route, which is the wool. Now, the advantage of the wool is that it protects you a bit better from the environment. It's going to be cooler when it's hot outside, it's going to be warmer when it's cold outside. You're not shadow playing anymore. However, you are going to need to put like a framework structure into this thing, sort of skeletal structure into it to help support it, and it's going to be heavier physically, more kilograms, and also it's going to be very, very expensive. This is the big downside of doing anything like this, and one of the reasons why I didn't start this project, because I didn't want to spend all this money on very expensive material and then make a mistake. However, having looked at what this guy in the SCA did, I kind of feel, yeah, I'm sure I can produce something without wasting my money. The wool that you need is not standard wool. It's a heavy Melton, which means it's quite thick, and it's quite a tight weave. I bought mine from a company in Sweden. Now, I don't have any connection with them, but because it's quite difficult finding suppliers of this, I'm going to put their link down below so you can have a look at what they sell. You can obviously see how much it is. I bought 35 meters of wool, which I'll show you in a minute. You've got two options there as well. You can have water resistant or non-water resistant. The water resistant still has the lanolin in it, and the non-water resistant obviously doesn't have the lanolin anymore. You're going to need to put the lanolin back in, and you're probably going to need to replace the lanolin, but you can get a spray-on lanolin, which, if you've had your tent for years, you're going to have to do that probably end of each season. And if you go for the non-water resistant version, then yeah, you're going to need to spray the lanolin on. One thing I would say about going to that online shop, they do have a postage and packing calculator, but that does not work for large orders. So if you are thinking about buying from them, email them first to find out how much it costs. That caused a bit of confusion when I was with them, because I thought that the calculator was actually correct. But they're very nice people, everything worked out nicely, and I'm really happy with what I got. So, like I said, I have, this is one packet. As I said, it's quite heavy, so that's one packet. We've got 2 packs of this. I said I was going to be serious, didn't I? But, oh, well, anyway. 2 packs of this material. 35 metres at 140 centimetres wide, and a huge amount of calculations.
Yeah, okay. At this point, I hadn't realised that I'd made a little bit of a boo-boo. So the 2 upright poles that you can see on this video, I had, in my calculations, in the paperwork, I had them at 2 meters 50, but for some completely unknown reason, I chopped these down to 2 meters 20. I have no idea why I did that, but that causes a lot of interesting problems from the offset. What I would suggest you do is don't be an idiot like me and check to make sure that the calculations, that everything is correct. Yeah.
you may have seen I have another video up which is me building my authentic bed, and I built that bed and then made the tent so it would fit over the bed. So the tent without the bell ends on either end, it's obviously not 240 because you have to lap over the end of the material. So it's just over 2 meters between the posts. So round about 4 meters long in total, and I think it's 2.5 meters wide. Once it's completely kind of put up, I'll check the measurements and see what happens. But
yeah, so as I said in that previous interruption, not 250 but 220, and that caused the tent to obviously be wider. And also, I can't do mathematics, as I just noticed from this. He can't do mathematics. I can. Well, no, not really, but I figured out the difference. So basically, when this tent ended up being put together, the distance between the two poles was approximately 3 meters, and the width of the tent at the base was 4 meters. If I had managed to cut the poles at 2 meters 50, then obviously it wouldn't have been quite so wide, which probably would have been better, but it still would have been about 3 meters between the poles. Okay, back to that me.
this is the bit where I'm quite unsure. I think I have got my measurements right, but you know, it's early mathematics. It was a very long time ago for me. Okay, I have 2 lots of this type of linen thread, which again, oddly enough, came from Sweden.
Okay, so this was a complete overestimation of the amount of thread that I would actually need. The tent ended up being, including the sod sheet, which is you have the tent wall here, and you have this other little bit that comes out and touches the ground, so it keeps you nice and cozy inside. So including the sod sheet and all the various bits and pieces of sewing that I did, that was approximately, say, about 150, maybe 160 meters of sewing, with a distance between each stitch of about 8 millimeters, approximately. That used up about half of one of those spools of linen thread that I bought. Obviously it's not a waste, because I'll use it anyway, because it's usable for all kinds of things, but really you only need to get one of those, or if you can find something that's a bit smaller, get one of them instead. Okay, back to that me.
I'll put the link down below again. Again, no connection to the firm, but this was the cheapest I found it. This is 16.2 linen thread, which is quite a fine linen thread, and it's really good quality linen thread. I've bought a lot of different types of linen thread, and not always good quality. So that's for sewing the material up. Now, as I said, you need to put in a structure to support the tent, and so this is a rope structure. So I have a lot here of hemp rope. So this is hemp. Talking to the guy in the SCA, he's an American, so he said 3/8 of an inch. That works out at 9.4, 9.6 millimeters. So I got 10 millimeter rope. I'm wondering if that's actually maybe a little bit too fat, and I would have gone for 8 mil if I could have done, but we'll see how that works out. This is going to need to be spliced in certain points, and then sewn into the seam. So you take the 2 bits of wool, you fold it over, and the rope goes in the middle of that seam as a supporting point.
Hello, me again. Now, it's probably worth saying at this point that depending on the thickness of rope, it has a different number of strands in it. The 10 mil rope is 4-strand rope. The 8 mil and 6 mil, they tend to be 3-strand ropes. And this makes a little bit of difference when you start splicing rope together. Most of the splicing videos that you find on the internet are all about splicing 3-strand rope. If you end up with 4-strand rope, you use the basic techniques, you can figure it out in your head, but it splices a little bit differently. But it's worth knowing that, you know, not all rope is the same, and you have a different number of strands depending on the thickness, and also not just the thickness, but also whether it's artificial material or whether it's a natural material like hemp. Okay, back to that me. And your tent pegs go through the loops that you make in the rope, and that means you're not putting too much strain on the wall. Where the rope is coming out of the wall, I'm going to reinforce it with some good quality Veggie tanned and quite supple leather. Oh, I forgot, the rope. I also have some thicker linen thread, which is this stuff, and that is going to be used for when I'm splicing the rope. I need to tie the rope ends off so they don't fray, and that's what I'm using here. What else do I need? Well, I also need the upright poles and the ridge pole. I had real trouble when I was looking. I mean, this was kind of like in the middle of Corona and lockdown, so that could have explained it. But I had trouble finding ash, and so I went for the next best thing, which is a redwood. I would really have liked to have had ash, and one day I might replace this with ash, I don't know. So I ended up buying a very large beam of redwood, which was advertised to be 60mm by 140mm. And then I put it on the table saw and cut it down the middle. So essentially, you know, it was originally like that, and then I cut it in half. That ended up being 61 by 66, and then went to the local do-it-yourself store and got this, which was the horrible clanging noise you heard a moment ago. Now, this is 3mm thick, and external measurements are 60 by 60. So that means I should explain. That's the. In my head, I'd planned it out so well. So the upright poles, which are these big ones here, they're in one piece. The ridge pole, that obviously for modern world, it needs to go into a car. So I'm building a collar for it. So it's in two parts. Hence the reason why this it has been cut down. I'm going to have to break out the table saw again in order to take this down to 60 by 60, but no great shakes. Obviously this, it only comes in a metre. I need to cut that down. I imagine about 40 centimetres would be sufficient for that. The ridge poles at the moment, they're probably way too long. But I wasn't really sure about the scaling, so I thought, make it too long and chop the bits off the end, and I can always find a use for a couple of lumps of wood. Not a big deal. I'm going to need more tent pegs, but that's an easy thing to do, and there's another video somewhere on making tent pegs, probably called pegging it, or running away maybe, something like that. Anyway, the last thing that I need, which I don't have yet, is some thinner, probably about 5mm, I would imagine 6mm hemp rope, and that I need for the closure for the flap. Okay, final interruption. It was 6mm rope that I ended up getting, so hemp rope. But I'll put a description of all the items that you need, if you want to build one of these things, in the boxy thing down below. So back to the dulcet tones of That Me. Now, there are different ways of putting the entrance into one of these geteld tents. You can, on some depictions you see the entrance is on the side, sometimes it's on the end. I'm going for the end, and I'm just going so that the flap just goes over, and then I'm going to do the loop and eye technique. So you sew a piece of rope down on the outer flap, on the inside of the outer flap, and you leave loops. And that loop goes through the eye on the inner flap, and you take that down, and then the next loop goes through the eye and through the bottom of the loop, and you keep on going until you seal it at the bottom. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, you'll just have to wait until I get to that part of the video. That's really long and complicated, but I hope that gives you a better idea of what you need in order to start work on an authentic tent. And I think probably the first thing I'll be showing you is how to splice rope, as that's the first thing I'm going to need to do. Splice some rope together, and then start putting the main body of the tent together. So I'll see you in the next part of this video. Arse.